Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading update. This is where I talk about the books that I read this week, what I'm currently reading, and could potentially read next week. I'm just going to admit that I had a really poor showing this week. I got sick. I had a migraine over the weekend, and then I caught this cold flu thing that's going around. It's not coronavirus. Please don't worry about me. It's not coronavirus. I had no fever, no dry cough. This was literally just a cold flu that was going around, and it hit me. So I was out for the count for 2 solid days in bed, unable to really get out of bed, and just too tired and exhausted. I was not able to read, which is number one. It's incredibly frustrating for a reader. I'm sure many of you know. But the other thing is that it's an indicator to my husband of exactly how sick I am. When I'm unable to read, he knows it's serious, and he amps it up to like code red in this apartment. So he was just a remarkable partner, and got me everything that I wanted. Would go out to the store and get me something to eat, made food for me, was there at my beck and call, even when I didn't need it. I was just sleeping, but it was very generous and lovely for him to do. But meanwhile, I was incredibly frustrated by looking at the pile sitting next to me on my bedside table, and not being able to stay awake long enough to read any of it. So I'm behind. I still got some things read, but not to the standard which you all have come to know that I can do. So, but let's get to it, because there's a wide berth between the two that I read. So let's start with this book, Passing by Nella Larsen. Now, I knew this was going to be a good book. I knew I was going to enjoy it. I've heard so many amazing things about it. So I was preempted to bias toward it going into it. But what I found here was so nuanced and so interesting, and went in completely different directions than I was expecting, but at the same time also went in other directions that I was expecting. This is masterful. Let me tell you a little bit about the story if you don't know about it. The story is of these 2 women, Irene and Claire, and they grew up together, and they weren't necessarily very close, but they knew each other growing up. Claire has decided that she is going to take advantage of the fact that she's of mixed race and has a white family, and while living with the white family, met a white man and decided to disavow and never acknowledge half of her heritage. So she is passing as white, and her husband's very rich. She has a lot of money and has a lot of access, but has this very, very deep secret that she's keeping. Whereas we have Irene, who is her friend, who is a light-skinned woman. So she can pass in certain situations, but she is married to a black man and has a child, and lives in the world as an African-American woman. What ends up happening is that they end up crossing paths. Claire is very lonely, and Claire is she's recognizing all the things that she had to give up in order to live this life, this passing life. And she misses her culture, and she misses her people, and she misses this side of her that she's had to ignore. She comes back to the town that they all lived in, and runs into Irene. And she wanted to run into people, and she wanted to find people. And immediately you start to see the challenges with this dynamic, in that in order for Claire to really be close to Irene and befriend her, she's going to be risking so much of her life. And so we're told, the story is told from Irene's perspective, but Irene is not necessarily a narrator that we can trust either, because she is also trying to construct a life for herself in a very specific way. This had very reminiscences of The Great Gatsby, in that you have someone who is sitting on the outside and observing in on a marriage and of a lifestyle. This is also at a time right before the crash and the Great Depression. And so there's an affluence here that I think is unique and I think very, very interesting that we don't read about very often. So the ending, just remarkable. This blew me away. I gave it 5 stars. And I ended up going and listening to Backlisted podcast, and they had a special segment on this. I'll put a link to it in the show notes below. So I highly recommend read it first before you listen to the Backlisted podcast, because they spoil all over the place. But just phenomenal book. I cannot recommend it enough. I think it's such a unique perspective and a great reading experience. So A+ here. Then something that started off so strong. This was Diana Athill's Instead of a Letter, a Memoir. Gorgeous cover right there. So I really thought this was going to be phenomenal. Even in the back it says tales of this woman who at 15 has this romantic love affair with a spirited Oxford undergrad and member of the RAF. They get engaged and then he breaks it off to marry someone else and then dies. So that sounds just romantic. The book starts off with her childhood and her experiences of her grandmother and the differences between her home and her grandmother's home, and recognizing that this home will never get passed down to her because she is not in line for it. Her mother, it's her mother's mother. Her mother is not in the inheritance line. An older brother is, and so it will go to her uncles and cousins. And that hanging and that feeling of longing a place is something that I very much understand. It's something that I always felt as a child. So reading this in those early stages, I thought it was beautiful. I loved it. I loved her spirit. I loved how she dealt with her childhood and the love she has for her grandmother. All of those things were great. And then we get into the romance, which was interesting. And that was the first third of the book. Then all of a sudden it ends. And then we have the rest of the book, just her talking about how she's kind of lazy. She's not very interested in a lot of things. And it just, this meandering of very, very long sections. I skimmed through a lot of it, and it did not hold my interest and it didn't come together. It was the most interesting things happened at the very beginning, and there was no resolution or no way to up the ante. It should have ended then. It should have been a novella. So I gave this a 2. I was very, very disappointed, unhappy with where it went and why it went there. It didn't seem purposeful at all. I thought it was very, very sad. And Hilary Mantel, blurbing the back, again, I know better. I know better than to read those and trust them, but here's another reminder. Okay, that was what I read. Let me talk about what I'm currently reading. So I am in week 1 of my read-along for Frances Burney's Evelina. I did get a chance to finish my reading, and so I'm ready to talk on Sunday with all the people who are reading this with me. The Voxer group is closed for this now, but we will be opening for next month, and there we'll be reading Belinda by Maria Edgeworth. This supposedly is Jane Austen's favorite novel, so we'll be looking at that in April. Oh, I won't talk about too much about this because I want to save it for my conversation and discussion with the people that I'm reading this with. But suffice it to say, very surprised, not what I was expecting. Then I'm very much enjoying my March Mystery Madness choice. I have a bunch that I'll try to weave in, but this is what I picked up first, and this is SJ Parris's Heresy. This is set in Elizabethan England. It's set in Oxford, and I'm here to tell you the joy that I feel when I read about streets that I know and places in Christchurch where things are happening. It just delights me to no end. And ironically, that this has a lot set in Oxford. This is in Oxford. And then obviously his Dark Materials was also set in Oxford. So I've had a lot of Oxford this week, which I can't get enough. So I'm enjoying this about halfway through. Really good, very page-turnery. Love the details. This is in 1583, and the story is that this gentleman, he is an ex-monk. His name is Bruno, Giordano Bruno. He is going there to Oxford to debate about science. And while he is there, a murder occurs. 2 murders occur. And he has been a witness, or at least there for the discovery of both bodies. Because of that, he needs to stay to give his testimony of what happened. It's very interesting, interesting point in time in England and what's happening in England as well in this science and the schism in the religions, the Papists versus the Protestants. Very, very interesting. The pace is great. The characters are really good. I'm enjoying it tremendously and flying through it, which is fantastic. And then the library gods definitely shone their light on me and let me have early access to The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larsen. If you know anything about Erik Larsen, he's a fantastic nonfiction writer who writes nonfiction as if it's fiction, just really narratively constructed in a way that just flows. And I find his books very interesting. I've been looking forward to this because it's about Churchill. And since I'm going to be spending some time in England in June, I'm very interested in possibly going to the war, his I think they're called the war rooms, I think is what they're called, and trying to take a look at and spend a little time looking into that. So this has been great. I really wanted to listen to it while I was feeling not well, but with his books, you really want to pay attention, and I just wasn't in the mood to pay attention. My mind was in and out. So I look forward to spending more time with that this weekend and next week. And then I have not gotten back to The Abundance by Anne Dillard, but I'm going to spend a little bit more time with that. So that's what's currently on deck. And then next week, I forgot to mention, I also have BookTube Prize reading. So I have 2 books. I'm midway through each of them. Can't say anymore. I almost did. Can't say anything. Then next week I'm starting a buddy read of My Antonia by Willa Cather. This is my lovely little edition, my Penguin Drop Cap edition. So I'm looking forward to jumping into that. And I'm going to be buddy reading Coventry by Rachel Cusk. Now I know that my photo has me reading this, and I started it. I just got sidetracked and had to put it down. So I'm happy to have a reason to pick this back up again. So thrilled with that. And to continue my BookTube Prize reading, which I'm hoping to finish, maybe not next week, but the week after. I have a plan to finish early to send my submissions and really think through how the stack rank them, because I've got an interesting group. So that's it. That's what I've got on deck. I thank you so much for watching, and hope that you all have good reading ahead. Have you read any of these? And if so, what are your thoughts? I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.